Guys, J here. Before this video gets started, I just want to say thank you guys for all the support on the channel recently. But as always, as per usual, we're going to tell you guys the vast majority of you guys are not subscribed. So make sure to go down below, hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications so you never miss an upload. And don't forget, you can always change your mind later. What's on, guys? J back with you today. Welcome back to Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, and we actually have a really interesting gameplay because usually I'm rocking around with the submachine gun, the AK-74U. This one we're switching over to the Krieg, changing it up just a little bit. So hope you guys do enjoy that in the background as the title. I don't know what I'm going to title it yet, but we're talking about the CDL and we're talking about coaches. So recently there's been a lot of teams that have picked up coaches or analysts or assistant coaches or whatever it may be. They've been picking up these, maybe former players or just, people in the scene that they now have as their coach. And how much, this is kind of the big question, is how much do those coaches actually help your team, right? A lot of teams, they set up VOD reviews, so they watch all your gameplay back and kind of go over what you guys did right, what you did wrong, and all that fun stuff. Just kind of review your gameplay, talk about who should run what roles, and what else do they really do? Kind of keep you in track and kind of talk about the problems of the game, or at least that's what they're supposed to do, and obviously get you set up for your next matchup versus your next team and get you ready, right? Spots they like to play, rotations they like to make, whatever it may be, usually the coach gets you set up for that. So, that's kind of the big question, is how much should coaches be involved in game, right? If you guys don't know, coaches usually are all behind the scenes, right? You don't ever see them, during an official match. Sometimes they're allowed to talk in between games. Sometimes, other esports are allowed to talk in game. And I know in Halo especially, coaches were allowed to talk, and they would, be reminded of when certain times were that they had to go pick up the power weapons and everything. But in Call of Duty, with the more recent times, coaches have, I don't think, ever been allowed to talk during the game, right? It's always been during the intermission or during, in between games, is what I should say. But then also there's a post that you guys see here from Reddit that said, should we add the ability to add a tactical timeout in search and destroy and control? Obviously we've been waiting on a pause feature in general, but should we be able to have tactical timeouts in Call of Duty, right? It's a big thing in like Counter-Strike, but with the, I don't want to say limited amount of games that we play in the limited amount of time we have in search, in control, that would those timeouts really help anything? Would they do anything? Would they be beneficial? Yeah. Would they? I would say yes, but also you don't want to make the matches too long, because if it's an absolute blowout, most likely that next team, or the team that's dominating, is gonna win that next round regardless. So it's interesting, right? But then you also look at how many coaches there are in the league, and you'd actually be surprised about the amount of coaches, realistically, right? Atlanta themselves have 4 alone. They have Crowder, RJ, Easy Mac, and Tupac. Crowder's their head coach, RJ is their assistant coach, Easy Mac is an analyst, and then Tupac is an analyst as well. Over in New York, you have Revan as their head coach, JP Krez as an analyst. Dallas has Rambo as their head coach / GM. Toronto's got Marky B as their head coach and someone I've never heard of named Flux as an analyst. Optic has Sender as their head coach. Karma as an analyst. JCap is in the LA Thieves camp with Novus. Now, I don't think it's Novice, but Novus as their analyst. Minnesota. Saint is their head coach / GM. Reppin, assistant coach / analyst. Los Angeles Gorillas, Bevels is their head coach. Ricky is their assistant coach. Some random guy named Doug is their analyst. So they have 3 coaches. Florida only has 1 coach. They have a head coach in Atura. Then you have London with Dominate, Shane. Dominate as their head coach, Shane as an analyst. Then you look down at Paris. They have Josh as a head coach, Op2 as an assistant coach, and Novus as actually is there 2 players with the same name? I'm not exactly sure, but maybe I looked at the wrong teams. But they have 3 coaches. Seattle has 2 coaches, Nubsy as their head coach and Teddy Rex as a search and destroy analyst. So usually if you look at traditional sports, obviously you have a bunch of coaches, right? You know, if it's baseball, you have your main manager, you have a hitting coach, pitching coach, bullpen coach, and a whole bunch of other coaches. But then when you look at, you know, like football, they have tons of coaches. You know, soccer, they usually have a few coaches as well. Basketball's got a couple of coaches. But how many coaches do these guys need? Right, so you have 2 teams that only have 1 coach. You have 7 teams with 2 coaches. You have 2 teams with 3 coaches, and you only have 1 team with 4 coaches, being Atlanta FaZe, right? It's crazy. But then when you look at, you know, what are other people saying, right? What are people from the community saying? And it's an interesting take from Merc here, right? He responded to the Optic Gaming, you know, I think this is from their podcast, I think, from the Optic podcast. An interesting take here from Merc. He said it helps players who couldn't shoot straight and talk at the same time. Then also sometimes coaches just talk trash and didn't really help. They just kind of yelled at the other team. And then he also goes on to say he'd be fine if they wanted to talk during game pauses or if timeouts are added. So a very interesting take from Merc, right? He's been on the scene for a while, former player, now current Call of Duty caster, and obviously he was one of the better players of all time, and obviously he knows his stuff. So, you know, what should be the standard for coaches? Personally, I'd like to see them on the stage, right? Even if they couldn't talk during the game and they only talked during timeouts, or even if they came on the stage, you know, during that time, right? You'd be able to see them. You could see them and hear them and everything. But what should be the standard, right? I mean, are you gonna, if you're Atlanta, do you bring all 4 of those coaches out at the same time? Probably not. But maybe make a rule, 1 coach at a time, maybe 2. I mean, you know, 1 would be, I think, more than sufficient. Maybe the assistant coaches and all the analysts and the S&D coaches and whatever else their titles are, maybe only those guys can help behind the scenes and not necessarily on the stage. Maybe only your head coach could be there. But I would like to see the coaches on stage. I'd like to see them more with a headset on. I like to have them hear comms during games rather than having to watch it back later. You know, if tactical timeouts were a thing, obviously you can't really do it in hardpoint, but in search and destroy, maybe. In control, maybe. But you know, it's a really big discussion to have. You know, do we want to change it? Do we want to allow coaches on the stage and allow them to hear the comms, you know, live and not just wait until afterwards? You know, it's a very good point. It's a very interesting discussion that people can have. And personally, I would love to see more coaches in the CDL. Mainly because there's a lot of old players. And I don't want to say old players because they're like mid-20s, but a lot of players that may not have made it in the player world, but maybe are good coaches or good in-game leaders, but maybe they lost their spot in the league. Maybe they, you know, weren't the best of players. They had the leadership roles, and now maybe they transitioned into a coaching role. You know, some players that won a lot back in the day, they could definitely help out with some of these younger players and younger teams, and maybe players that and teams that just aren't doing well right now. They maybe started strong, not doing the greatest recently, or you know, it might help, right? You look at guys like Aches. I know TP is doing his own thing, streamer right now, but old guys like Killa, you know, even Study and Nameless. I know some of these guys work for the league now, but even like Censor, I mean, he's pretty notable in this scene. So there's lots of names out there that could come back in the scene, be coaches for some of these teams, and overall, you know, bring back some of those notable names, right, to the Call of Duty scene, and hopefully help out some of these teams, because a lot of teams are struggling. But that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy, hit that like button down below if you haven't yet, or if you're brand new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button down there as well. Turn on those post notifications so you never miss an upload, and don't forget, you can always change your mind later. But as always, guys, we'll see you in the next one.